Have you ever thought of Bigfoot as a mindless beast? What if I told you it once rescued a mountain lion and then vanished without a sound? That summer, in the grip of a record-breaking drought, a lonely park ranger named Eli Mercer witnessed something no one would believe. The truth? It didn't come to hunt. It came to heal. It guided deer to a water well. It bandaged an injured wolf with forest leaves. And when Eli saw it again, there was a child-sized handprint scar on its chest, as if it remembered someone, as if it once was someone. This story is drawn from real ranger accounts in Olympic National Park and an ancient Quinault legend of Sasletcha, the one who remembers the forest. In the next 5 minutes, you'll meet a version of Bigfoot unlike anything you've seen in movies. Sacred, mysterious, heartbreakingly human. Even if you don't believe in legends, you'll believe in what it feels like. Eli, a grieving father, found his son's wooden bracelet, the one lost years ago, cradled in Bigfoot's dying hand. No one knows how it got there, but he knew. Something still remembered. If you've ever thought nature was just survival, this story might change you. Skip it, and you might miss the most beautiful creature that summer ever gave us. One that came not to haunt us, but to forgive us. I never meant to see it. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be up that ridge. It was late June, bone dry. The kind of summer where even the breeze feels like it's been sifted through ash. My boots cracked the dust with every step, and every step made me think about how long it had been since the last real rain. Ridge 7 was dying. Hell, most of the park was. I'd been hauling water tanks up to the animal stations for weeks. Routine patrol, they said. Just keep the herds hydrated, keep the public out, and stay out of trouble. Nobody told me what to do when the land itself started gasping. That morning, the valley felt wrong. Quieter than usual. No birdsong, no rustling. Not even the damn squirrels that usually scream at me for walking too loud. Just stillness. The kind that settles in when something's listening. I remember setting the last tank down at the edge of the creek bed, dry as bone, split like old clay, and wiping the sweat off my brow. I was about to head back when I heard it. A sound I've never heard before. Not a growl, not a scream. Something between thunder and mourning, something heavy and hurting. I followed it up the ridge, climbed higher than I should have. Pulled myself up through ferns and dead pine needles until I got a clear view of the canyon bend. That's when I saw it. Down in the ravine, there was a young mountain lion, maybe a year old, pinned under a fallen branch, trapped where the last trickle of water used to run. It was flailing, terrified. Just above it, the mother paced in a frenzy, teeth bared, snarling at something out of frame. Then it stepped into view. At first, I thought it was a bear. But the way it moved, low, measured, upright, I knew it wasn't. 7, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in thick dark hair, matted in places, slick with sweat or water or maybe both. But what got me wasn't the size. It was the silence. That thing didn't roar, didn't charge. It approached slowly, hands out, palms showing, like it understood the mountain lion was protecting her cub. Like it didn't want to fight. I crouched down, holding my breath, didn't dare blink. The mother lion lunged once, stopped short, and the creature, God, I still struggle to call it by name, just stood there, still, patient. Then, with a suddenness that made me flinch, it crouched and gripped the fallen branch, lifted it like it weighed nothing. The cub yelped and scrambled free, bolting back toward its mother. She didn't chase the thing. She just stood between her baby and it, growling low. And then it did something I'll never forget. It looked up, straight toward me. Now I was at least 200 yards away. Camouflaged, high up, no movement, no sound. But it looked right at me. Eyes dark, steady, unblinking. I couldn't move. I wasn't afraid, not exactly. Just pinned. Like it knew I was there, like it had known all along. Then it turned, walked back into the trees, vanished like smoke. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. My mouth dry, chest tight. When I finally moved, my legs were numb. I scrambled down, half stumbling, heart pounding like a war drum. When I reached the creek bed, the branch it had lifted was still there. Heavy, twisted. No way a cub could have moved it alone. But what really stopped me, what made my stomach twist, was the rock formation just beside it. 3 stones, stacked carefully, deliberately. One flat, one round, one narrow. Like a lever, like a brace, like something built to rescue. Animals don't do that. Not lions, not bears. Not anything I've studied or tracked in 22 years wearing this badge. I knelt beside it, touched the top rock, still warm. I don't know why, but I did it gentle. Like I didn't want to disturb something sacred. Then I sat down, right there, dirt clinging to my uniform, sweat soaking through, and for the first time in 6 years, I cried. Not from fear, not from shock, from something deeper. See, when my boy died, when Caleb went under that ice and I couldn't pull him back, I stopped believing there was meaning in anything. I stopped praying, stopped hoping. I buried more than a child that winter. I buried the man I used to be. But watching that creature, watching it care, it did something to me. It reminded me that maybe not all wild things are cruel. Maybe not all monsters deserve the name. Maybe some are just misunderstood. I sat there for hours. Sun climbed high, shadows stretched, and all the while I stared at that dry creek and thought, why me? Why now? It didn't make sense. Still doesn't. But something inside me shifted that day. Like a frozen part of my chest started to thaw. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. Who would believe me? A ranger, half mad from grief, saying he saw Bigfoot cradle a cub like a wounded child. But it happened, and in the days that followed, I started watching closer, looking for signs, listening for things I used to ignore. Because once something like that looks you in the eye, you stop pretending the woods are empty. And deep down, whatever it is, it saw you too. Something had been near my truck. I didn't see it at first. Not in the usual sense. There were no broken branches, no torn tarps, no signs of a predator staking out prey. Just silence, and something off about the air. Like the scent of burned cedar had curled through the trees, but there hadn't been a fire. I'd driven out early, way before sunrise, to check one of the trap cameras I'd set up along the ravine. That camera wasn't for tourists. It was for me. For whatever that thing was I saw the week before. What I thought I saw. I parked at Ridgeview and walked the quarter-mile trail to the site. Sky was overcast, smoke haze clinging low. That orange wash bleeding through like the forest itself was holding its breath. Everything felt slower out there. Sound didn't carry. Wind didn't stir. When I reached the base of the bluff, I found the camera still strapped to the cedar tree. Untouched, battery full, lens clean. But the feed? Nothing, not even raccoons. I stood there staring at the blank frames like maybe they'd change if I looked long enough. But that wasn't what made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was the dirt next to my front tire back at the truck. 2 impressions, side by side, pressed deep in the gray ash dust. Longer than a man's foot. Wider, bare, with toe spreads that looked more primate than human. They were clean, not a stumble, not a drag. Just 2 prints, planted like something had walked right up, paused, and left. No other tracks going or coming. And in the exact center of the left one, pressed so lightly I almost missed it, was a fragment of pine bark, fresh, shaved smooth on one side, as if by hand. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't random either. It felt like a message. I stood there for longer than I cared to admit, staring at those tracks like they'd stare back. When I finally left, I kept the bark. I didn't put it in an evidence bag or log it in a report. I slid it into my back pocket and told no one. Later that afternoon, I returned to Ridgeview to top off one of the water stations. I was supposed to be in and out in 15 minutes. But something stopped me. I heard hoofbeats. A cluster of deer were moving through the trees. Not running, not scattered. walking in a line, slowly, like they were being guided. I crouched low behind the water tank and watched. Then he stepped out behind them. Same shape, same size, the thick fur, the deliberate gait, but this time in full view. He wasn't hunting. He wasn't even interested in them as prey. He moved alongside the herd like a shepherd, eyes scanning, body between them and the woods. One of the fawns veered off, started into a patch of deep mud near the embankment. The moment its hoof dipped, he raised his arm, just once. No sound, no motion, just a slow, open palm through the air. The fawn stopped, backed away, rejoined the group. I couldn't breathe. That moment, it wasn't instinct. It wasn't survival. It was intention. The herd moved on, following the dry stream bed, until the last of them disappeared into the fog-dappled slope beyond the ridge. And him? He lingered. He turned slightly, as if listening for something behind him, then bent down and pressed something into the ground. Before I could react, before I could even blink, he was gone. Not a branch snapped, not a leaf stirred. Gone like mist in reverse. When I reached the spot where he'd knelt, I found it. A single deer hair, white, straight, and clean, planted upright in one of his own tracks. He'd left it in the heel print, like a marker, like an offering, like proof. I didn't touch it, just knelt there, took it all in. I don't know how long I stayed crouched like that, but the sun had dropped lower than I expected by the time I moved again. And in that strange golden light, something shifted in me. I wasn't afraid anymore. Something deeper had taken root. Something quieter. That thing, whatever it is, it knows me. Not just sees me, knows me. And that terrified me more than anything. Not because it meant I was in danger, but because it meant I wasn't alone anymore. And after 6 years of silence, that kind of knowing, it hurts like hope. So I walked back to the truck, slower than before, and looked down once more at those tracks beside my tire. I didn't sweep them away. I didn't mark them either. I let them fade on their own, because some signs aren't meant to be kept. Some are meant to haunt. Even now I still feel it. That sensation you get when something watches you not to threaten, but to remind you you're being seen. To remind you not everything that walks in shadow means you harm. And maybe, just maybe, some things walk close so you'll finally look up and ask why. Or worse, ask what comes next. I woke up gasping, heart pounding like I'd been running. Sheets twisted, jaw clenched so tight it ached. And I remembered everything. The forest wasn't burning in this one. It wasn't empty either. It was alive. Alive in a way I'd forgotten it could be. Golden light sifted down through high branches, like fireflies had nested in the trees. There was something gentle in the way the air moved, like breath that never ended. And in the middle of it all, I saw a child, barefoot, blonde hair matted with dirt and pine sap. He was wearing a carved wooden bracelet, one just like the one I'd given Caleb that last Christmas before the ice took him. He wasn't alone. There was something walking beside him, towering, covered in fur, moving like a shadow dressed in muscle. But it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel monstrous. It felt like protection. When I sat up in bed, the air in my cabin was thick. No breeze, just the weight of something old pressing on my chest. I walked to the drawer by the window and opened it. Dug under the stack of old field notes and park fines until I found it. The bracelet. It should have rotted by now. Years of sweat, mildew, blood. But it hadn't. The carving was faded, yeah, and the twine had hardened. But it was still intact. Still his. I held it for a long time, pressed it into my palm like it could press something back. Maybe memory. Maybe meaning. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, a new face showed up at Ridge HQ, Dr. Marin Yazzie, sent from the Ecological Council out of Bellingham. Her specialty was forest recovery post-disturbance, but she wasn't like the others they usually sent, those clipboard scholars who spent more time drawing boundaries than listening. She listened. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a tired smile and said she'd been tracking reports of flora recovery anomalies in old-growth pockets. Anomalies was the word she used, but I saw the way her eyes lingered on the tree line, like she already knew what was out there. We drove up to the northern ridge that afternoon, where the humidity hung so thick it felt like the woods were sweating. Maren didn't talk much, but when she did, she asked the right questions. About how many days since last water delivery, which species were nesting low, how the old trees were holding, and then, almost offhand, she asked if I'd ever heard the name Saslet Cha. I paused. Said it sounded like Salish or one of the older tribal tongues from the Olympic coast. She nodded slowly. Said it meant something like, the one who walks between. Said her grandmother spoke about it when she was little, not as a warning, as a prayer. I didn't say anything after that. But I didn't need to. She looked at me and nodded, like she already knew I wasn't sleeping right either. By the time we reached Station 6, the air had turned metallic. Storm, maybe. Or smoke. Either way, something was shifting. We were checking water pressure when we heard it. Not a growl, not even a howl, a whimper, something wounded. We followed the sound into the brush and found it just before the slope dropped. A gray alpha, massive, ribs heaving. Fur matted with blood near the haunch. The kind of wound you don't survive unless something wants you to. But that wasn't what stopped us cold. It was the bandages. Not cloth, leaves, pressed with sap, tight around the joint, and not chewed or pawed, wrapped, deliberate. Maren knelt first. She didn't touch it, just looked. That's yarrow, she said quietly, and devil's club. These weren't torn from the ground, they were cut. The wolf's eyes opened, looked straight at her, then me, and there was no fear in them, only trust. We backed away, gave it space, let the forest breathe again. When we returned that night, I reviewed the camera logs from Station 6, half expecting the usual static. But the footage was there. Short, fuzzy, but enough. A tall figure crouched beside the wolf. Huge hands moving slow. One resting on its head. Not like a master, like a friend. I didn't speak for a long time after that. Didn't need to. The image burned itself into my mind. And later, when I sat alone on the porch, drinking black coffee that had long gone cold, I looked out across the fog rolling through the trees and whispered, "Why do you help?" But I knew the answer before the question even left me. Because it remembers. Because it doesn't just see us. It sees what we leave behind, what we break, what we bury, and maybe what we still hope can heal. When Maren came by the next morning, I showed her the footage. She didn't gasp, didn't shake. She just whispered, "It's not guarding species, it's guarding spirit." And somehow, that made more sense than anything science ever gave me. I returned to the wolf's clearing the following dusk. It was gone. But I swear on the ashes of everything I've lost, that for a brief second, I saw it standing just beyond the rise. Not the wolf, the other one. Still, watching, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to hide. Didn't feel the weight of my own shame pressing me back into the earth. I just stood there. Let it look. Let it see. And somehow, in that silence, I understood something I couldn't put into words. It wasn't just healing the wounded. It was healing the forgotten, and the ones who never got the chance to say goodbye. And something tells me, it's not done yet. I shouldn't have been out alone. I knew better. Ridge 7 was unstable. Had been since the quake in May cracked half the dry channels clean through. But I went anyway. I'd spotted an anomaly on the old survey map, an unmarked depression I didn't remember ever cataloging. And something about it pulled me, like a cord winding tight behind my ribs. Like I needed to see what was down there, even if I didn't know why. It started quiet. Air dead still. The kind of quiet where even the flies forget how to buzz. The woods felt brittle, like they'd snap if I breathed too loud. Light leaked through the canopy in long pale spears, but the ground below stayed cool, damp in patches, almost untouched. I followed the bend east of the burned cedar marker, took a steep descent, and circled behind a limestone shelf. That's when the ledge gave way. No warning, no tremor, just silence, then break. My foot hit moss. Moss gave way to void, and my body dropped. I hit rock, then rolled. Slammed into something hard and unyielding. All the air sucked from my lungs like it was punched out by the mountain itself. Pain flared white across my left leg. I tried to move. Couldn't. Something was off. Wrong angle, dull burn spreading fast. My radio had snapped free somewhere above me. I reached for it anyway, even as I already knew it was gone. The hollow I'd fallen into wasn't deep, maybe 15 feet, but it was tight. Walls closed in sharp on either side, and the only way out was straight up. Not with my ankle like this. At first, I tried to stay calm. Told myself I'd crawl, I'd find a handhold. But the more I tried, the more the silence pressed down, thicker than the dirt. And something else came with it. Breath. Not mine. It was subtle at first. A shift in air pressure. A weight in the dark. I froze. Not a growl, not a footstep, just presence. Then movement. Branches, cracking, soft thud, closer. I turned my head and saw a shadow at the lip of the hollow. Broad shoulders, long arms, silhouette etched against the gray sky like it had been carved there for centuries. It didn't climb down, it dropped. And the earth didn't shake when it landed. It stepped closer, slow and quiet. Crouched low beside me, studying without blinking. I couldn't make out its face. Light too thin, shadows too deep, but I felt its eyes. Heavy, ancient, like it wasn't just seeing me, like it was reading me. I didn't speak. My throat had closed off. It didn't touch me. Instead, it turned. Started collecting. Broken branches, saplings, stones with flat sides. Its hands moved quick. Sure, like it had done this before. I watched it brace the largest limb against the rock wall. Used another to wedge it tight, forcing leverage. It wasn't random. It wasn't survival instinct. It was geometry. It was thought. And then, halfway up the wall, it paused, lifted a lump of charcoal from the fire-scarred earth, held it like it remembered the shape, then pressed it against the wall, etched a line, then another. It stood, stepped back, and looked at what it had made. I dragged myself upright. Pain shot through my leg like a blade, but I needed to see. There, scrawled across the slate stone above the makeshift ramp, were 7 simple words. Some things still deserve to climb out. My breath caught in my chest, not from fear, not even shock, from recognition. Because I'd said something like that once, not out loud, not to anyone, but to myself, to Caleb. The night I buried his shoes in the fire pit behind my cabin, because I couldn't bear to see them by the door anymore. I remember whispering it through clenched teeth. I don't deserve to crawl out of this. And now, those words, twisted, reframed, stared back at me from the stone. The creature looked down at me one last time. Not to threaten, not to pity, to give permission. Then it turned, climbed out the same way it came, didn't look back. Didn't need to. It had already said everything it needed to. I don't know how I got up that ramp. Adrenaline, maybe. Or maybe something deeper. Something quiet and old and human that hadn't burned out in me yet. When I reached the top, I didn't call for help. Didn't radio it in. I sat right on the edge. Watched the wind move through the treetops like breath through lungs. And I cried. Not because I was broken, but because something out there didn't believe I was. Something had watched me fall, and didn't leave me down there. Didn't leave me in the dark. And as the sun sank low behind the ridge, washing the forest in that soft orange glow only July knows how to conjure, I finally asked myself, what else might be waiting for me to climb toward it? It started with a smell. Long before the flames came, long before the emergency alerts lit up every ranger's phone, and the sky turned the color of bruised rust, I smelled it. Burnt sap. Dry pine turned to bitter smoke. That awful scent of scorched moss and memory. I was 3 miles into the Northwest Trail when the first wind shift carried it in. I stopped mid-stride and looked up. The light had changed. What used to be gold had turned flat and brown. No sun, just ash in the air. And something underneath it, low and rumbling, like the forest itself was warning me. The fire line had breached the west boundary. That meant Ridgeview was cut off. It also meant the last viable water source, the spring-fed hollow just east of Timber Wash, was now the only drinkable spot left for a 5-mile radius. The animals knew it before we did. By the time I made it back to the overlook, I could see them moving. A slow migration. Deer, elk, even 2 black bears lumbering in the same direction, heads down, eyes blinking through the smoke like they were walking toward a ghost. Not in fear, not in panic, in trust. I called Marin on the emergency band, told her to reroute any hikers south, told her I'd stay with the ridge herd until the flames passed or the trail was lost. Then I loaded what gear I could carry and started moving east. The smoke got heavier with every step. Trees stood blackened along the ridgeline like burned-out sentinels. Birds were gone. No chirps, no calls, just the occasional snap of dead limbs dropping under their own weight. By the time I reached the hollow, the clearing looked different, and I wasn't the only one who thought so. They were already there, hundreds of them. Herds clustered close, heads low near the muddy spring, steam rising off their backs like breath. Coyotes curled in corners beside fawns. Raccoons waded through the shallow ends next to foxes. Predator and prey, drinking side by side. I don't think I breathed for the first 5 minutes. Because in the middle of it all, half shadowed by the red glare rolling in from the hills, stood him. He wasn't watching from the trees this time. He was leading. He stood near the far bank, shoulders braced wide, both arms stretched outward as if keeping something at bay. I saw the silhouette of a cougar cub beside his leg, still, not trembling, just waiting. And that's when I saw the fire crest the ridge behind us, a wall of light. Not orange, not yellow, white. It moved like it had teeth, wind-fed and hungry, and it was coming fast. I turned, ready to shout, to do something, anything. But he was already moving, not away, toward it. He broke from the herd line, sprinted up the incline in 5 strides, and slammed his shoulder into a dry oak at the top of the slope. It groaned, shifted. Then he grabbed another, half dead and leaning, and began pulling. I don't know how many trees he brought down, 4, 5, but each one landed across the narrow channel like a barricade. He was making a fire break. Smoke swallowed the top of the trail. My lungs burned. My skin felt like it was peeling under my clothes, but I couldn't stop watching. Because in the middle of all that rage, in the heart of something no human could ever tame, he was trying to protect it all. And then, through the haze, I saw something small and dark stumble across the clearing. A fawn, but this one was too late, too far behind. It collapsed just before the waterline, legs shaking, mouth open in that helpless, soundless scream animals make when they're too far gone. He saw it too. I swear to God, he ran like a father to a crying child. He scooped the thing up, cradled it like it weighed nothing, and turned his back to the fire, shielded it, even as his fur caught ash, even as embers fell like tiny comets across his shoulders. I took out my camera. I shouldn't have. But something in me, something human and flawed, needed to remember this, needed proof. The lens clicked twice, then I lowered it. Shame hit me before the last shutter sound finished echoing, because it wasn't for me to capture. It wasn't mine. He knelt beside the spring and laid the fawn down gently. Its chest didn't rise. He knew it. Still, he stayed there, head bowed, eyes closed, like he was mourning. And in that moment, in that silence, everything inside me just broke open, because I'd seen men bury their own blood with less tenderness. Marin found me an hour later, slumped by the hollow's edge, ash coating my jacket, camera limp in my hands. She asked what happened. I couldn't speak. I just pointed. She followed my gaze and froze. He was still there, kneeling, one hand resting on the fawn's chest, the other on the dirt. Marin didn't cry. She didn't whisper some poetic line about nature and balance like people do in stories. She just stared at him, and then said something I'll never forget. "It mourns because it remembers what balance means. That's more than most men can say." When we left the hollow that night, the wind had shifted. The fire backed down. The air smelled like cedar again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something sacred had been left behind. Something the rest of the world would never understand. And maybe that's for the best. because not every act of grace wants to be seen. Some are meant to stay burning, inside the ones who witnessed it. It started with the smell of coffee and the sound of a drone. I just sat down on the back porch of the outpost, mug in hand, ash still clinging to my boots from the fire 2 days before, when I heard the soft mechanical whir buzz overhead. At first, I thought it was Forest Service doing another sweep. Then I saw the sticker on the bottom of the drone, a skull wearing night vision goggles. Not government. I tracked it as it moved toward the tree line, silent, fast, scanning like it knew exactly what it was looking for. And that's when the pit opened in my gut. They were here. The legend hunters. The fringe-type guys who show up in unmarked trucks with thermal gear and million-subscriber YouTube channels. Men who don't understand what they're chasing, only that they want it caged, or worse, filmed bleeding. I found the first trail cam 2 hours later. Not mine. Mounted high, blacked out, facing the watering hollow. I yanked it, crushed the lens under my boot. Then I followed the scent of cigarette smoke and beef jerky downwind. 5 of them, camped less than a mile from the boundary line. All geared up, tents like military surplus, night scopes, MRE packs, and guns. Big ones. Marin and I tried to block the trail with a downed tree the day before, but it wasn't enough. They had bolt cutters, 4-wheelers, a map they'd clearly been building from stolen satellite data. I walked straight in, didn't introduce myself, didn't smile. "You need to leave," I said. "Now." One of them, the one with mirrored shades and the backwards ball cap, stood up slow and grinned. "You Eli Mercer?" I didn't answer. He pulled out a Polaroid, a blurry frame from the fire line. A figure in the smoke. Too grainy to prove anything, but just clear enough to get stupid people killed. "We know what's out here," he said, "and we're not leaving without it." I told them they were trespassing. Told them the fire zone was still unstable. Told them if they didn't leave, I'd call enforcement. They laughed. Another guy, tall, camo vest, red beard, chimed in. "We're not poachers, we're researchers." I stared at the .308 slung across his chest. "That for research too?" He smirked and turned away. I smashed 3 more of their cameras that night. Thought I could slow them down. But the next morning, I heard a shot. Not a hunting shot, not the echo of a kill. This one was close. Panic shot close. I dropped everything and ran. The trees were thinner near the south trailhead. I cut between fallen logs, sweat already pouring off my back. The air felt wrong, charged. Then I saw the blood. Not a lot, just a few smears on the ferns. Then the man, one of the hunters, maybe 25, face ghost pale, shirt ripped, blood on his leg, crumpled beside a rock like he'd been thrown there. He was shaking, eyes wide, lips trembling. Said a bear hit him, but I saw the tracks. Too big, too narrow. Not a bear. I heard the branches shift before I saw him. Massive, silent, stepping through the mist like a memory. Not charging, approaching, not snarling. Watching, the hunter screamed. Tried to stand, but before he could even lift the barrel of his rifle, the thing stepped between him and the trees, shielding him. And then, from the other side of the ridge, the bear came barreling through. Real bear this time. Black, maybe 300 pounds, probably riled by the gunfire. Coming fast. The creature, him, moved. Faster than I've ever seen anything move. He slammed into the bear with a sound like thunder snapping against granite. The ground shook. I fell backward. Trees cracked. The bear growled. No, roared. But he didn't stop. He grabbed the thing by its scruff and drove it back, teeth bared, low and guttural. Then the bear ran, bloodied, dazed, alive, gone. And the creature turned, looked down at the wounded hunter, and began to walk away. That should have been the end of it. But the kid, too stupid or scared or broken, reached for his sidearm and fired. One shot, I saw the impact, saw the way the thing staggered. Not collapsed, not attacked, just recoiled. Then looked at him, at all of us, and stepped back into the shadows. Didn't scream, didn't fight, just disappeared. I reached him before anyone else could. Stood between him and the man with the rifle. I was screaming. I don't even remember what I said. All I remember is the blood, so much darker than I expected, so quiet. And then Marin arrived, and everything froze. I stayed there for hours, even after the kid was airlifted out, even after the rest of those bastards were escorted back down the mountain. I stayed, because he didn't deserve that. Not after what I saw, not after everything he'd done. He didn't bleed because he was a monster. He bled because he protected one. And I swear, as the night crept in and the forest quieted again, I felt him near. Not gone, not angry, just hurt, and maybe disappointed that we still hadn't learned, that we still bring bullets where reverence should be. And somehow I knew that wound wasn't going to heal. Not easy. Not this time. We found him just after dawn. The light hadn't broken through the trees yet. It was that blue hour where everything looks like memory, flat, faded, soaked in silence. I didn't speak. Neither did Marin. We just followed the streaks in the moss. Not blood exactly. Something darker, almost black. The trail led us along the ravine and up behind the hollow, into the part of the park that even the deer had stopped using. Deadfall so thick it tangled your ankles, wet rot curling out from under the ferns. Everything smelled like something ancient trying to breathe. We reached the rock shelf near Devil's Hollow. That's where the prince stopped, and that's where we found him, curled into the base of the cave wall, his body half hidden beneath lichen and shadow, one arm draped over his chest, head slumped forward like a felled statue, breath shallow, but there, still alive, but only just. Marin moved first, dropped to her knees and started unpacking her satchel. Careful, deliberate, quiet. She laid out the poultices like she'd done this before, like she'd done it for people. She wasn't talking. Her hands were shaking, but her breath stayed even. I approached slower. It felt like stepping into a church no one had prayed in for centuries. He was massive, even in stillness. Shoulders torn from the bullet, dried blood matted across one side. But it wasn't the injury that held me. It was the mark on his chest, a scar, pale, faded with time, pressed deep into the muscle, shaped like a child's hand. Not a burn, a brand of memory. And I recognized it instantly, because Caleb had one just like it. He'd fallen from our porch steps the summer before he died. Cut his ribs open on a split nail. It left a handprint-shaped scar after it healed. He'd call it his ghost badge. Said it made him braver. I reached out, touched the edge of the scar, and for a moment, just one breath long, he opened his eyes. Not wide, not scared, just open. And he looked at me. Not like prey, not like threat, like he knew me, like he'd been waiting. I didn't speak, didn't know how to. But I pulled something from my jacket pocket, something I hadn't taken out since that dream weeks ago. The bracelet, Caleb's, worn, frayed, still carrying the smell of that winter I lost him. I placed it gently in the creature's hand, and his fingers closed around it. He didn't squeeze, didn't flinch, just held it, like it belonged. And I cried, right there in the dirt, next to moss and blood and ash, because somehow I knew this wasn't just about him saving me, or the deer, or the wolf, or the fire. This was about remembering what we lost, what we buried, what we were too broken to grieve. Marin placed a poultice on his wound and leaned back. She whispered something in Navajo under her breath. I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't have to. He looked at her, then at me. And for a second, I swear I saw the shadow of a boy behind his eyes. Not a vision, not a ghost, just memory. His or mine, I still don't know. But it held me like a current, and for the first time since Caleb vanished under that ice, I felt something come loose in my chest. Not pain, not hope, something older, like forgiveness. Not from him, from myself. He lay back then, closed his eyes, and I knew he wasn't dying. He was resting. He'd given us enough, and we were finally ready to carry it. We stayed until full daylight broke through the trees, until the gold spilled across his fur like firelight made clean. Then we left. Didn't mark the trail. Didn't speak a word. Some places you don't return to with questions. You return with silence. And sometimes, if you're lucky, something silent meets you there. The rain came slow at first, Like the forest wasn't sure if it wanted to let go. Just a soft patter at the edge of the canopy, drops tapping the leaves like fingers remembering a song. I was on the north ridge when it finally opened up. No thunder, no warning. Just a clean, full rain, cutting through months of ash and thirst. The earth drank it like a secret being forgiven. Marin and I didn't say much that morning. We stood near the new post, the one where the old ranger tower used to be before it burned out in '98, now rebuilt as part of the Preserve Initiative. No cameras, no fences, just a sign. Quiet zone, no motors, no drones, no questions. Underneath that, smaller text. Walk softly, leave nothing, take only reverence. We'd fought to make it happen. The foundation had balked at first, said it wasn't practical, said there was no educational value in silence. But we held our ground. We knew this land didn't need to be explained anymore. It needed to be remembered. We turned the old fire roads into walking paths. Let the creeks grow wild again. No guided tours, just space. Raw, unfiltered, alive. And in that space, something stayed. You could feel it when the mist settled, when the wind curled up from the ravine in the early hours and carried the scent of old pine and river rock. You'd be standing on Trail 11 near the old ash bed, and the hair on your arms would rise for no reason at all. That wasn't fear, it was respect. We started seeing fewer tourists. But the ones who came, they stayed longer. They sat on mossy stones and closed their eyes. Kids stopped asking what animal made that sound, and just listened. People started whispering, even when no one else was around. Because some places teach you how to be quiet, and that was the point. One morning just after sunrise, I took the long trail around Fog Bend Hollow. A boy was there, maybe 9, maybe 10, standing barefoot in the creek, tossing pebbles into the current like he was waiting on something to answer back. His grandfather sat nearby on a fallen log, watching but not interfering. The boy turned suddenly, like he felt something, and looked toward the tree line. And then he stilled. Didn't move. Didn't speak. He just watched. And I followed his gaze. There in the fog, just beyond the veil of firs, a shape. Still, massive. Not crouched, not hiding. Standing, one hand resting against a cedar trunk like it belonged there. Like it had always belonged. The boy didn't scream, didn't run, just stared. And then the shape slowly turned. Took one step deeper into the mist, and vanished. The boy kept looking for a while after, like part of him had just been rewritten. I walked up to him later and asked what he saw. He just said, "It looked at me like I was supposed to be here." I nodded, because I knew what that felt like. Later that week, I returned to the cave. Alone, I didn't go inside. Didn't need to. I just stood outside, listening to the sound of the rain roll through the rocks above me, watching as the moss grew back over the mouth, like the forest had decided to keep its story again. But not forget it. Never forget it. I placed something on the ledge before I left. Not a camera, not a trap, just a small stone, flat, smooth, carved with a name. Not his, my son's. Because something in me had finally understood that whatever lived out here, it didn't just save me from falling deeper into myself. It carried something forward I was too broken to hold on to. That bracelet, that scar, that silence. It had all been remembering for me, until I was ready to remember too. I don't think I'll ever see him again. Not clearly, not like before. But sometimes, when the mist hits just right and the trees hush like they're listening, I feel him nearby. Not watching, knowing. And that's enough. Maybe we weren't ever meant to capture it. Maybe the point wasn't to prove it existed. Maybe the point was to be reminded we still do. And that in a world that forgets too much, too fast, something out there still remembers us and wants us to remember what matters. I close my journal every night with the same line now. Simple, honest, and more true than anything I've written before. Maybe we were never meant to find it. Maybe we were meant to be found. Some stories aren't meant to be solved. They aren't puzzles to complete, or legends to be dissected under floodlights and camera lenses. Some stories are reminders, soft, stubborn echoes of who we used to be, before the noise, before the forgetting. Out there, between the tree lines and the fog, there are truths that don't fit into science or folklore. They live in silence, in the way animals pause when the wind shifts, in the way the forest sometimes looks back, not with eyes, but with memory, because memory has weight, and some things remember us long after we've forgotten ourselves. This wasn't a story about monsters. It was a story about mercy, about what happens when the wild chooses to spare us. When something ancient decides not to run, not to fight, but to stay, to hold a space for the better parts of who we are. Not because it needs to, but because somehow it still believes we're worth the effort. And maybe that's the most haunting part. Not that something impossible walks among the trees, but that something so impossibly kind still does. In a world that's grown louder, harsher, and more hollow with every passing year, maybe the most powerful thing isn't proof. It's presence, something that doesn't ask to be believed, just respected. Maybe we don't need to understand it. Maybe we just need to not betray it. Because when the wild offers grace, when it kneels beside the broken, when it shields the weak, when it remembers what balance means long after we've forgotten, we're given a chance to stop being conquerors and start being caretakers again. So if you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for walking with us through the quiet places. Thank you for listening. If this story left something inside you, an ache, a question, a sliver of wonder, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below. Share what it stirred, what it made you remember. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories told with reverence, not just noise, hit that subscribe button, give it a like, and help us keep the signal going. Because some stories are meant to be passed down softly, and some silences are worth preserving.